What's going on? Global Hack Week, Rosendo from MLH here. I see that some folks have already joined us. I will wait for a couple more folks to get through those wonderful Spider-Man ads that people are mentioning in the comments section. Hey, what's going on, Night underscore 782? Wonderful to see you. I think this is the first time I'm seeing you in a live workshop, but hello to you as well. I appreciate you knowing my name and spelling it correctly with the extra O at the end. Love to see it. How's everyone doing today? Let me know in the chat. We're gonna get started just in just a moment, but I just want to make sure everyone is in here, getting through the ad blocks, ready to join us, and ready to hack the stack with Stack Overflow. So, yeah, I'm good. Thanks for asking. If there's a lag, let me know. We'll keep it kind of delayed for the folks that are still catching up. I do want to start in a moment or so. So just make okay. So there is a lag. My face is frozen. Ooh. Audio or video quality. All right. Well, let me do this. I am going to. So it's my video quality. I don't know. I'm not seeing it on my end. I'm gonna close out some windows. Oh yeah, you're right. The Twitch stream is a little wonky here, but my studio looks good. So I'm not 100% sure. What I'll do is I'll remove myself from the stream. Yeah, the video is looking real rough over there. So sorry folks, give me a second. I'm just gonna remove myself and pop myself back. Let me know if that helped. I'm checking out the Twitch stream. It looks like it's loading up again. I'm moving. Yeah, now we're moving. But like the screen looks black on my end, just a blank screen. Yeah. All right. Let me know how that's looking. What a great way to start Global Hack Week security. Just make sure y'all, like when you're testing out these new platforms, that you're good to go. It looks like I'm loading. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and introduce the folks from Stack Overflow. We've got Ellora, Josh, and Chris from the Site Reliability Engineering team. And since y'all can't see me, hopefully what's going to happen is you're going to be able to see them once they do pop up on screen. So let's go ahead and give them a huge round of applause, y'all. Once again, Ellora, Josh, and Chris. All right, it looks like your screens are good to go. Yeah, feel free to take it away, y'all, and enjoy.
Okay, let's go with a round of introductions. I'll go first. My name is Ellora Praharaj. I am the Director of Reliability Engineering, and I'll be chatting a little bit about what do SRE and gas stations have in common. Over to you, Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm a staff SRE at Stack. I'm on the foundation team, mainly responsible for the public website.
Chris? Hi, everybody. I'm Chris H. I am an associate SRE at Stack, and I am mostly responsible for our enterprise software.
Cool. Yeah, I know we'll have some time for Q&A after this, and Josh and Chris are the folks who are literally, boots on the ground, hands-on, working. So they'll be able to answer all of your technical questions. I'm just mostly around here for decoration. All right, Rosendo, back to you.
Do y'all want me to go ahead and start sharing the screen for the presentation?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, sounds.
All right, so HackCon 2023, I know we've run one of these last year, and I think we had a tremendous amount of response. In terms of the workshop, like I said, I will be chatting a little bit about what do gas stations and reliability engineering have in common. Okay, first up, who am I? I already introduced myself. That's my bike, that's my dog. I live and work out of New York City. Don't own a car, which is why I have a bicycle. I started off as an individual contributor, learned C as my first language. Over the years, I've worked in C, C++, Fortran, which I was made to learn, Perl, which I was made to learn, JavaScript, which was all right, which really shocked me just because, coming from like a background with C is like, oh, I don't need to like allocate any memory. This just happens. Oh, cool. Okay. Then pivoted to Python later on in my career. I've been a tech lead, then I moved on to being a team lead, managing people directly, and then engineering manager. And at Stack now, I'm a director. I have been involved with SRE things since 2015. This is still a newer branch in computer engineering overall. And though it's been around for many, many years, like almost a little over a decade now, it's still relatively something that a lot of companies are adopting. What do I do today? So yeah, I manage a team of reliability engineers at Stack Overflow. So for example, Josh and Chris, who are on my team, we worry about fending off DDoS attacks on our public sites, because anytime our sites go down, we get a lot of chatter on Twitter and people yelling at us, asking about why, Stack Overflow is down. Still not sure why people want to attack a free community site, but given the geopolitical climate and, well, yeah, let me just put it this way. If I ever find one of them, it's not going to go down well for them. Another big focus for us is obviously evolving the current architecture that we have and focusing on, hey, what is the future going to look like? How are we going to continue improving our scaling and our security needs? And with all of the changing stuff that's happening in the market, AI is currently the hot new thing. How are we going to involve all of those in here? Right, let's move on to the topic of the day. So I think 100+ years back, this is what gas stations used to look like. Folks literally dressed up in a suit, people around, someone's going to be giving you like white glove service. And this is kind of what a modern gas station looks like. Not really seeing the people in the ties or the people in the overalls anymore, just the cars coming up, a bunch of sleek stuff. So when we talk about self-service at a gas station, what do we mean? You pay at the pump. There's no need for you to use cash. There's no need to go inside and talk to a person. There's no need to go in and physically swipe your card. You can do it from the pump itself. You can pick your fuel grade. So you have control over what that is. You lift the nozzle and you pump it yourself. So you don't have to wait for someone to come in and pump it for you. You have full control over the amount you fill. So when we're talking about self-service at a gas station, and I know that New Jersey and Oregon don't really have the notion of self-service, so I'm going to conveniently ignore them for the purposes of our conversation. But when we talk about the self-service notion, it's really about enabling the users, the person who's driving up the car, to be able to do all of these things themselves. So what are some of the things that we have to focus on when we're talking about self-service at the gas station? Obviously, the most important thing, well, what type of gas should I choose? You need to know whether you're choosing petrol or gasoline or diesel. You want to know what grades you're picking. You want to understand how much gas do you need. Are you just going full tank, or are you just filling up for whatever amount of money that you care about? Very important, how do I not light myself on fire? Because, well, it's a gas station. There's a lot of flammable liquids. Stuff can happen. And then finally, what if the pump runs out of gas? It's not something we usually think, but I have actually been in the situation where there was a strike, and this is in France, and we literally went to like 10 different gas stations, and our car just stopped in the middle of a street. So that was a story for the books. It's very funny now, but at that moment it was it was super stressful. Right, let's go through each of these. So, yes, I realize that I've been talking a lot about gas stations. What does this have to do with reliability engineering? So let's pivot there. So when I talk about what kind of gas should I choose, the analogy there is really about picking what the right solution is. What are the application needs that you're focusing on? What is the tech stack that you want to do? What kind of languages do you want to work in? There has to be organizational support there. It can't be a free-for-all that you just bring in whatever tool you want to there. There's things like compliance, GDPR, and obviously the element of support there. So you have to make sure that you're working within your organization's framework, and obviously cost constraints. We can continue throwing money at the problem, but hey, money doesn't grow on trees. So we have to make sure that we find something that works within these constraints. So that's kind of analogous to what type of gas should I choose. And these are things that we have to deal with in reliability engineering. in terms of how much gas do I need? Well, that is analogous to what I call as figuring out what the compute units are. How much memory would I need? How much CPU would I need? What kind of IO and bandwidth requirements are we looking at? And the way to figure that out is understanding what an expected load for your application would be. There's things like performance needs, how fast do you want your application to be? Is it going to be on the order of milliseconds? By the way, Stack Overflow is very, very fast. We've worked very hard to keep it that way. Or is it something that can actually just take on the order of hours because let's say it's like a quarterly batch job that doesn't really get reviewed on a regular basis? The big thing to note there is you can go in with an idea of what your expected load would be. You can go in with performance testing and figure out how your application's going to look like and how it's going to behave under load. But if you don't have observability and you don't have metrics and logs and an insight into how your application's behaving, then it's not super useful. So that's why observability is a key point here. Basically, you can leverage that as you go along, as you see your application behavior over time to figure out how you want to tune it up or down. Maybe it is too fast, like maybe you need to put some, speed breakers in there, which is a very nice ideal condition, a nice problem to have. Usually it's the other way around. Hey, our application's a little too slow. Let's figure out where the bottlenecks are. Is there something that's file-based, or is there something that's IO-based? Is there like slowness in the database? With the right observability, you can really debug and troubleshoot and find out those scenarios. So that's the analogy of how much gas do I need? I am seeing a question asking about observability. So observability, okay, yeah, I'll jump into the Q&A after. I'll answer that question later. All right, moving on. How do I not light myself on fire? How do I basically not do stupid shit? In reliability engineering, what we focus on are the good software engineering practices. The big thing is a huge and heavy focus on automation. And SRE isn't just someone who's doing click ops or like, looking at a bunch of screens and clicking around and manually configuring it. An SRE is expected to be a programmer, because the idea is that you're bringing software engineering, programming principles to the operations support. So we really, and this is something that we're all fond of saying, we want to automate ourselves out of our current jobs by writing software for it so that we can go off and do other cool things. So there's a heavy focus on automation. That is a great way to not have our systems blow up in our face, which is the analogy of not lighting ourselves on fire. Leveraging CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery. And if folks have questions about that, I can touch a little bit about that later. And hey, the big thing that's the focus for this week for Global Hack Week, which is security. So yeah, we really have to be very, very considerate of what the security and privacy implications are. We have to make sense. We have to make sure that we're thinking through all of these compliance requirements that the world has, and just in general, being able to shore up our defenses. So for example, when an attacker comes in and tries to attack us, we have enough defenses in our place that we can prevent any fires coming on. Well, sometimes stuff can still happen that are external to our control. So maybe the pump can run out of gas, or I think someone say, how did I stop the gas from pump? Oh, maybe the pump can get jammed. All right, well, we have to do a bunch of troubleshooting. So we've done all the automation, we've put in all the good principles, and there are still things that'll happen because, well, Murphy's Law. So embracing failure is one of the core principles of SRE, of reliability engineering as well. Outages will just happen. We just have to learn and live with the fact that things are not going to be perfect all the time. So hey, observability. Actually, I'll go in a little bit into observability because I saw the question come up. Observability is really about having a very deep insight into how your systems are behaving. So for example, if your application, let's say your application has an API and some other client software is coming in and making calls to those APIs. If you don't know how many clients are connected or how those clients are calling those APIs or how many API calls they're making, then it's not really going to help you in terms of understanding what your performance and tuning needs look like. So you want to have metrics such that you can say, hey, I have this application. here are the clients that are connected to it. Here are the number of calls that are going. Here is the amount of time certain requests are taking. So those are what we term as application metrics. Then logs is another big part of observability. When an application is going through and doing certain functions, or let's say it's calling out to a database, you have a log that says, and a lot of traditional programming, you know, like for example, when we are debugging, when I started learning with Cifra first, my big thing would be, well, my software isn't working. How do I go about debugging it? And I would just put in a bunch of printfs all over and try to have them print out to the console. So think of that, like that observability that you have into what exactly the application is doing, but at a much higher level in terms of having a central system that can collect all those logs and present it to you. Because guess what? We're in this world right now where we have distributed systems. An application might be running on multiple servers, or if you have something that's running in the cloud, it's not just running on a single server that you control. It's not just something that's local to, you know, your Mac, your laptop. You want to be able to see what insights the application is doing. So it's about like architecting the right logging information and having them in a central place. So that is, you know, at a very high level, like I consider metrics and logging to be the big parts of what observability is. That gives you an insight into how the application is behaving. Another big part is the alerting feature of it. So cool, we're collecting all these cool metrics, we're collecting all these logs, we know how our application's behaving. Well, the next step would be, hey, if an application starts misbehaving or there's something going wrong, we want to be alerted to it. So we want to make sure that we have a system that's able to set up alerts. So let's take an example. Let's say that, you know, our application is able to handle a load of like 100 calls per minute, for example. If it starts going above that 100 calls, we want to be able to put in some kind of a throttling mechanism in place. But I don't want, you know, Josh or Chris to be sitting and watching a dashboard that says, okay, it's going above 100. Now stop, you know, start throttling the application. Guess what? We want to have that automated. Remember the automation, automating ourselves out of jobs? In the old days, yeah, I'm whatever, I'm ancient. In the old days, I've literally been in the position of having to track these things manually and then put in, you know, whatever changes we needed to. But again, reliability engineering is all about automation. So what we would do is build in alerting such that, let's say it goes above that particular threshold we've set, it automatically sends an alert out. So if there's an issue, it's not that someone has to be awake and constantly watching dashboards or metrics or things like that. They will just get automatically notified. And there is an entire ecosystem of tooling out there. There's stuff like Prometheus, Datadog, PagerDuty, all of these things that can help you essentially on the observability journey, which is making sure you understand what your application is doing, as well as being alerted to when there are issues. I am seeing a comment about all for the sake of keeping availability up. Yes, uptime is extremely important. That is one of the core focuses, because guess what? If your systems and services are not up and available, you're not going to have people using them. So that was observability, and if there are any targeted questions, we're happy to take them in the Q&A. Going back, so what if the pump runs out of gas? These, again, the issues will happen. So we want to make sure that we have enough monitoring, alerting, all of those things in place. But when an issue actually happens, we want to have a robust incident remediation process in place as well. Let's say, I'll just take a real example. Let's say we're getting like DDoSed on the Stack Overflow site, and we are seeing that maybe, some attackers are coming in and exploiting certain vulnerabilities, certain slowness of writes. So what we do is we will create an incident. And again, there's third-party tooling and stuff like that you can use to manage that process. But we have essentially almost like a playbook that guides people. So it's not like we're flying blind here. What essentially would happen is someone will get notified, because remember, our alerts are automated. Someone will get notified that, hey, there's some weird behavior on the site. And then we have a written process. We have a well-documented standard operating process that'll come in and say, okay, cool, let's start investigating. Let's figure out what the impact is. Let's make sure that we're able to restore service if functionality has gone down. And then we can worry about the remediation parts, actually doing like what exactly went wrong and stuff like that later. So it is very crucial and important for all companies to have an incident remediation process in place. Yes, we do have a SIEM in place as well. So yeah, the pump runs out of gas, there's stuff that's happening out of our control. In reliability engineering, we just have to plan for the worst. And then deal with the inevitable that, yes, there will always be errors, there will be outages. It's just making sure that we have the right approach in place to be able to handle those. So yeah, just kind of going back, we chatted about what type of gas should I choose. That is picking the right solution. How much gas do I need? Figuring out what the compute units are and making sure that you're able to observe them so you can tune them over time. Not lighting myself on fire, which is putting in the preventive measures from the beginning, and then dealing with outages. And that is it. I am all done here. And if you folks have any further questions on that, we'll be happy to take them now. Rosenda, should I just stop sharing the screen? Or Alex? All right. In terms of, all right, I'm just going to take questions from here. Is there a tutorial for Hack the Stack Challenge? I know that the Major League Hacking folks have put together essentially a link for the challenge that we have. There will be details on there. So I'm going to defer to Rosendo on that. In terms of tutorial, there's a lot of online resources that you can look up as to how to throw, traffic at certain things. Is there a link for the slides? Rosendo and Alex, maybe that's something that we can deal with offhand, and I can send over a copy of the slides. Do you focus heavily on network traffic analysis? Hey, Josh, you want to take this one?
Sure. That comes back to observability. Absolutely. So we keep a thorough history of all network traffic, not just the telemetry of, how much bandwidth or how many requests, but also exactly what the request is, so that we can rebuild basically events as they happen, or go back in time and basically figure out what happened exactly. Because if you can figure out everything that happened, that's how you build automation warnings and prevent certain bad traffic from happening in the future.
Okay, can you describe the main technical tools that you use as an SRE? What prior knowledge would one need to get a job in this field? So Chris is someone who has recently graduated, recently-ish. He's one of our newer folks. So, hey, Chris.
Recently-ish, yeah, that counts. So from the perspective of someone who is recently graduated and trying to get into the field a little bit more, a lot of my experience comes from the cloud side of things. So definitely familiarizing yourself with that. I'm talking about, platforms like Terraform or CloudFormation for AWS, those things. A lot of other things that you would probably want to be skilled with would be networking and observation tools, such like Datadog and things like that.
And I think that answers another question that was there. What tool do you guys use for network analysis? Because we've focused on Datadog as our main observability tool. Any advice for future cybersecurity professionals? Don't trust anything. Plus. Security first. Zero trust is something that's getting to be pretty much of a buzzword, but I would focus heavily on that. Yeah, I know it sounds like a joke, but don't trust anything. You have to assume that the attacks can come from anywhere, outside, internal, whatever. Make sure that you focus on the right processes. And again, going back to the automation principles, automate yourself out of all of that manual toil, because there's just no way you're going to be able to keep up. And what would be really useful is to be able to leverage, high-level programming languages to do that automation. So for me, I think that would be the advice. Josh and Chris, anything you want to add to that?
Sure. From a security point of view, there seems to be two branches. There's the analyst side and the engineering side. The engineering side is definitely, as Laura said, be a programmer and basically understand systems, get a security plus, but also just know, basically keep up with the different kind of vulnerabilities and understand how they form, because it's a pretty simple pattern that you kind of recognize. And when you're an engineer, you know how to exploit new ones. The analyst side, basically, you get as many certifications as you can and understand how to classify and manage vulnerabilities. So it just depends on which track you want to go to.
What type of intrusion detection system or encryption do you use? Josh, you want to give a quick overview of Signal Sciences?
Sure. We have a WAF, web application firewall, that we have installed called Signal Sciences, and it does smart analysis of all the different traffic. It can prevent things like, cross-site scripting, SQL injection, very simple things like that. But we also then feed that data into our observability tool, Datadog, which also has security observability that gets more data than just what a 6i has. So we combine all of that to make a better overall picture of what's going on.
Okay. What do you think is one of the most important skills to develop as an SRE working in Spheres? This really relates back to the previous question that we had about, again, automation, learning programming, and then zero trust. Any of the certifications we should get outside of CompTIA? That is not something I will be able to answer, unfortunately. Cybersecurity and all that isn't. What exactly are you looking to do, Ranjir Boy? It depends on what you're trying to get done. That's why. So while we wait on comments for that, what are the languages that you recommend for a cybersecurity student? I mean, languages change. I mean, from my perspective, I hire people who are familiar, at least like strong in fundamentals with one language, but are willing to learn other languages as well. There isn't like a specific thing that you have to be tied down. Oh, you have to only know this. Python is something very popular. I would recommend starting with that. But the main thing is, as long as you have a fundamental straight in terms of like understanding how memory allocation works, how resource consumption works, good engineering principles, you should be able to pivot to whatever language is in use at whatever company you end up working in. So I wouldn't say there is a specific language that I would recommend. I mean, if you really want to go all in, Rust is the is the hot thing, because it really it has a lot of protections in place for memory allocation, stuff like that. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add to that. I don't know, Josh or Chris, if you wanted to add to my rambling there.
I would say, just outside of the realm of the engineering side, if you want to do cybersecurity analyst stuff, a lot of that depends on breaking down programs as well. And assembly is always an incredibly valuable skill that I know people look for in analyst positions.
Do you have a bug bounty program? We do not. We are a free community site, so we rely on the generosity of our users. And trust me, we have a lot of folks that reach out and tell us when we're doing things wrong. I know a lot of people say cybersecurity is insecurity since it's never 100%. Yep, it is never 100%. This goes back to, what if the pump runs out of gas, right? Like outages will happen, security breaches will happen. You just have to plan around it and have remediation plans in there. What are some cybersecurity protocols you think are beneficial to use? Not sure I completely understand the question here. Josh or Chris, either of you? I'm going to go back to my thing that I've been saying, zero trust. It's like assume the worst and prepare for the worst, and then assume that breakages and breaches will happen, and have a plan for that. If you have any detail to add to there, go ahead and put it in the comments. I'm going to move on to how does your team interview for an SRE position? Chris, you want to talk through your interview experience?
Yeah, I can totally do that. So our interviews are broken up into multiple stages. Normally, there will be a preliminary interview where you just sort of meet with someone from the company to try and see if you're a good fit for the team, if you have the background that they're looking for. After that, you tend to, depending on scheduling, you either jump into an engineering interview or you jump into more of a people interview. I went through, I think, 4 rounds on mine, where I met with the manager for the team and the hiring manager. I also met with the director for our department. And it was a lot of sort of design work, because SREs, some companies will tend to have you do a lot of programming or theory work. Some companies will have you sort of try to do more design work to see if you have a grasp of, like, I don't know how to say this correctly, being able to comprehend all of your infrastructure and being able to add to that infrastructure. And that's what we do here at Stack. We're sort of transitioning away from just a purely programming oriented interview for SREs. And that's what I got to go through as one of the first candidates to that new revised interview process.
Thank you, Chris. All right, I am heading to get my CompTIA. Fantastic. I'm interested in cloud and programming. Okay, I see what you mean. So any other certificate? So my personal viewpoint is, and this is not the opinion of my employer. I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there. Is I don't really consider the number of certifications that a person has against their name to be a harbinger of how good they're going to be. As a hiring manager, I have reviewed so many resumes where people have literally listed out like 20 different certifications. And when I've had interviews with them, they've just not met the mark. So I would say, sure, there are some big name certifications out there. If those are requirements for specific positions that you're interested in, go ahead and do those, but don't get certifications for the sake of getting certifications. You'll be much better served by focusing on the fundamentals. How about Golang? Yeah, Golang's a good language. Sure, go for it. Coming from a data science point of view, what is your advice coming this side of things when moving on to cybersecurity? Well, the good thing is, from a data science point of view, you are already very familiar with being able to crunch numbers and deal with stats and all of those things. So you already have a background of like being able to deal with metrics and leveraging the data that you have in terms of gleaning insights. I would say in terms of coming over to cybersecurity, use that as the knowledge trove. Use those skills because that's going to be extremely helpful in figuring out and planning out scenarios for the future. It's like, look, you know how to take large amounts of data and analyze them for whatever insights that you need. Those transfer over well into cybersecurity. What is the future of AI and ML in security? Is it a good domain if I'm interested in development, AI and security? From my perspective, yes. AI is currently the hot new thing. It's, in my career, I've seen a lot of buzzword hypes, gone through crypto, we've gone through VR, all of those things, Bitcoin, anyone. AI is currently the new thing, but AI is kind of different. It's just the way we've been approaching it. So in terms of what it means for security, I think there's going to be a lot of very interesting intersections there because guess what? AI can be used for a lot of misinformation. AI and social engineering and all of those things can be used to even have breaches a lot more easily. So from my perspective, I think that is an extremely good domain to be in. It's probably going to be something that is going to be in good demand. Josh, Chris, anything you want to add on there? Okay. Are there any? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just thinking for a second. I think that a lot of what you just mentioned is really important, but it's also a matter of thinking about the tooling for this. We don't know a lot of the current tooling that will be important for AI stuff. So getting a grasp on what we have currently, as much as people say prompt engineering for interacting with the sort of large language models that we have right now is probably a good first step.
Thank you. Are there any projects you would recommend to get started with cybersecurity or SRE or anything to do outside of just theory? I'm currently working on CTFs and looking to participate in hackathons. Hey, Josh, thanks for taking this.
I know a lot of people like to do home labs. So if you are able to spin up simple VMs and basically start, like Chris mentioned earlier, Terraform or something like that, right? See how you can basically write code as infrastructure as code to spin up, let's say, like a Kubernetes cluster in a home lab. That would be a great practical practice of something that you will actually need in the future. At home, what I've personally done, because I don't like just building something that I'll never use because I find that as a waste of time, I have Pi holes at home running on Raspberry Pi Zeros. So that's an ad blocker on the network level, but because I'm a big SRE nerd, I can't just run it on one. I need to run it in a cluster so that I can basically update them live and so on and so forth. So I built code to basically deploy Pi-hole into 3 different Pi Zeros and keeping uptime and updates and things like that.
Yeah, do something that gives you joy. Have fun at it. Do you think there is a point at where something can be too secure? Yeah, the point where, well, it's kind of funny. Jokingly, I would say at the point that you're actively putting in too many obstacles in front of your people's paths to doing their jobs, that would be where something is too secure. In the sense that really it sounds like it's been more of a process issue. I know this sounds a little amorphous, so let me try to give an example. For example, like, traditionally a lot of companies have been on the side of, oh, a developer does the coding and then they hand it over to an SRE to do the deployment. Because guess what? A developer shouldn't know what the production systems look like because, compliance reasons or whatever. The person who writes the code isn't the person who's actually running and managing the code, so we have separation of duties. That's something that is, I think, a great big fallacy if companies implement that. And I've seen companies do that and actually start walking away from it, where they think they're being very secure by having this separation and almost like, a firewall of sorts between the different departments. But guess what? That ends up actually stepping on the toes of the people trying to get actual work done. It really impedes teams' ability to be able to iterate fast and be agile. And really, the conversation there is, well, how do you empower everyone so that they are not just writing the code, but they're able to build it, deploy it, and monitor and run it all the way out to production with the appropriate guardrails? So in terms of something can be too secure, the answer is no, with the caveat that unless you're putting in too many policies to actively hamper, the agility of your teams, then yeah, that's time to revisit.
Too secure.
Yeah.
Too secure is basically you've made a password policy that's so onerous, people put sticky notes on their monitors. That's how you know you're too secure, because you've gone all the way around and basically screwed yourself.
That's a much nicer way of putting it.
I would say that that's something that comes up a lot because, you're working with people that, understand security and are just as smart as you, right? And so the thing that comes up the most often is if you put something in their way and there's enough force, they'll just move around it. They know how to get around these things and they have access to a lot more things than you would think that they do. So when you make something too secure, you, like Josh is saying, you end up having people open up whole new holes in your security just to get around certain things.
And someone commented that too much security adds friction to user experience. That's where it's absurdly secure. So yeah, people will find ways around it. All right, going back to our question train, do we need certification to apply for any cybersecurity job? Honestly, it depends on the specific listing and the, that you're looking at. From my perspective, I don't think there's any standard set of like certifications that you need. Look at the role, look at the position you're interested in, and it would be based off of those requirements. Again, like I said earlier, don't just get certifications for the sake of getting certifications, because that is absolutely not a measure of how good a person's going to be. Someone hacked the designated route. So fun fact, actually, yes, it is something that redirects to random YouTube videos. That is exactly what that link does. It's kind of like a joke link and something that we make available. So no, it's not been hacked. It is It's a feature, not a bug. Okay, let's see. Speaking of design, could we get some recommendations on good resources to learn system design to prepare for interviews? Hey, Chris, what did you use as resources?
So I got incredibly lucky in that I had internships through college where I got to work with real systems, both at my university and at startups. But I would say that a lot of these things come down to not just what is standard practice, but once you start learning the tools of the trade, so to speak. So if you are looking at going into on-prem stuff, if you want to learn Jenkins or Puppet, things that manage those types of things, or if you're looking at cloud, you want to learn something like Terraform. If you start looking at what the Azure resources are or what the AWS resources are and start dreaming up in your head how you would connect them, how you would combine them, and if you have any context that are able to look over your work as you sort of plan these things out, think about how you want to do them. That's what I did, and worked very well.
Thank you, Chris. How easy is it to transition from your position to related positions? Example, moving from security engineer to security analyst to manager to something a little further away like software engineering. I didn't start exactly as a security engineer. I actually started off as an individual contributor who was actively programming. I've been programming since college. I programmed through the first bunch of years of my life. From my perspective, again, it really comes back to, I know it's cliche, but if you have your fundamentals strong, you really understand how systems work, you understand how operating systems work, what compilers do, how memory allocation works, then you will be able to transition fairly easily. The other big thing there is, and for example, I have hired people who didn't really have an idea of like, okay, if I was at a previous company, we were very heavily focused on C++. I ended up hiring some people who knew how to program in Python and other languages because guess what? They had their fundamentals strong. And more importantly, they had the right attitude. They were willing to learn. So I would say in terms of like being able to transition to related positions, as long as you have your fundamentals set and you have the right attitude in place and you're willing to do it and you're willing to learn, yeah, it's going to be like, there's going to be a ramp up time, but it is doable. Any tips on getting my first internship? Well, I've been out of the intern business for a really long time. So, hey, Chris, I'm going to poke you again. You talked about internships.
I did talk about internships. Mm-hmm. So the two routes that I've seen used the most commonly are job boards. I'll make it 3 routes. 3 routes that I see most commonly are job boards, either knowing someone in the industry already that works at a company. Lots of times companies do have internship programs. They're just not that vocal about it. So it doesn't hurt to just reach out, contact companies that you're interested in and ask. The third one is normally universities will have some sort of agreement with companies in the local area, and they will have intern positions for your department if you're in university that you can apply to through them.
Okay. And yeah, definitely keeping in touch with your seniors is a great way of getting an in, at least so you have an understanding of like, oh, cool, these companies are hiring. What about blockchain security? What about it? Not sure I understand the question there. I'm going to take a guess here and say like, people were talking about how blockchain and the fact that the security is going to be distributed and not any single person has all the pieces of information was going to revolutionize it. I think it is still an area worth pursuing, but I don't think it's mature enough. What about security in LLMs in the same vein? Well, we know that ChatGPT hallucinates and makes up facts. And again, with the explosion of LLMs, I don't think people are really focusing on security. So for me, that is a big concern in terms of how to solve it. I just don't know. I think the field is moving too fast and we're still a little, we're trying to get all of these like cool data sets and answering questions and all of these things out there without really focusing again on the fundamentals. So I think this is something that's going to come up later this year. Does SRE have a BYOD? And I'm assuming the D stands for disk policy. And if so, do they have remote wipe? Generally, like if you were, especially at a company, like the company is going to have its own policy. So we're not going to allow folks to just bring in their own disks. It is going to be company assets. So there's going to be policies and processes in place where those assets, we treat them as proprietary things. It's going to be on the company to be able to own those. But in terms of like remote wipe, I can give an example here. Like if folks have laptops, right? Like we give our employees their laptops. Let's say the person leaves the company. Yes, we do have policies in place and the appropriate software such that we can reach out and do remote wipes. But we don't allow folks to just bring, like a disk that they've bought off of Amazon.
I have something to add. Depending on what your IT department sets up, there's different MDMs that can allow for BYD. So it's basically a give and take when it comes to your security posture and the tools you have available. Because while BYOD for your laptop, a lot of people use their phones and have stuff on there. So you want some kind of remote management solution where you manage the data that's on someone's personal device and just cordon it off into a separate area that can get wiped remotely if necessary without completely wiping their personal data, which is on their phone. So it's more of a InfoSec/IT implementation.
Yep. Wouldn't it be possible to utilize Redact APIs and HTTPS security protocols with AI? Yes, I don't have much of an answer beyond that. Like, yeah, all of those things are available. I just, again, my perception is we're not spending enough time on those implications yet. Your views on dark web pen testing? Sure, as long as they have the right intent. I don't really have a lot to add there. I don't know. Josh, do you have something? Because all I can say is, hey, if someone wants to come help us out and tell us that we have vulnerabilities, cool, I'm all for it.
Do you mean dark web as in Tor and as in from Tor because it's just used as a proxy, or actually something very specific like hosting on the dark web? It more detail. What I mean is, yeah, we get DDoS from Tor all the time, but we're not. At one point, we actually had to block all of Tor for like a couple days because we were trying to basically reorganize and figure things out. That didn't that wasn't received very well by the general public, but we had to do it. But now we have better countermeasures. So I guess it depends on what you mean specifically.
All right. Let me see. Does SRE use MFA? Yeah, multi-factor. You can't just use username password. We definitely have MFAs in place all over. Can get pretty annoying sometimes when you have to call DigiCert and beg them to approve stuff for your certificates, but yes, we do. Josh has had to deal with this over the past week, and he is showing us a physical token that they sent over. How to get out of theory while studying for cybersecurity. Chris, you want to talk about how you can do like projects and stuff?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So at my school, we had a hacking club, and that was sort of their whole thing because we had an independent IT program from the CS program that I was in. And a lot of them were in the same boat and wanted to get out of theory and start practicing on things. My big recommendation is if you're doing things alone, like Josh mentioned earlier, setting up a home lab is a great way of doing that. Set up your own security, see if you can pwn it. That's a great way of testing things. If you're in university or you have friends that are interested in the field, clubs are another great way of doing these things because you can a lot of times get access to equipment that is donated from other places that you wouldn't normally have. A lot of enterprise equipment, once it reaches a certain age, most companies are just looking to pawn it off and they just want it gone. So if you reach out, you can get your hands on a lot of slightly dated, but still very much in use enterprise equipment, which helps take you out of that theory stage a lot faster.
Thank you. Where can we get started learning how to do a DDoS attack? So last time around when we had the the Hack Week Challenge, Hack the Stack, we had provided a few links and resources. My recommendation would be just start leveraging, the online resources that are in place. There's a whole bunch. how far behind does security policy lag behind security technology? Could you briefly explain the biggest security issues in the world today and contrast how much of the problem is with tech makers and how much comes from bad security policy? I would say security. Yeah, I don't really have a metric for this because it depends on the industry. Like, for example, certain industries are heavily, heavily regulated, right? Like when we are talking about things like the medical industry or stuff that actually impacts people's lives, the technology, the security policies that are in place can actively be almost like a hindrance to moving very rapidly with technological advancements. But as we've seen with all the disruptions that have happened over the past decade, right, like stuff like Airbnb or Uber, their whole point, or well, Facebook, right, very famous for move fast and break things. The whole spiel had been about like put stuff out there in front of clients, and then we'll worry about the security implications later. So I think it really depends on the specific industry that you're looking at. In general, most companies want to be as compliant as possible. Governments around the world are coming up with different policies, but technology is still evolving a little too rapidly, and we're seeing that happen with AI. The biggest security issues in the world today, well, I am no security expert, but from a reliability engineering perspective, what I can say is we're constantly dealing with, the bad actors. There is unfortunately geopolitical implications. For example, with the war in Ukraine and all that stuff, we're seeing hackers come in who are actively trying to exploit vulnerabilities in our systems. I don't know if this is controversial, but I think for me, the biggest vulnerability still remains to be people, because people can get careless. You can't just, have folks, you can't rely on human beings. I'm going to assume best intended. No, it's not that I don't trust people to be, that I think people are going to be malicious, but we're human. We forget. Like I forget, I don't know. I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. So you're going to forget to do certain things, and people will continue to be the biggest weakness in there. And in terms of bad security policy, I think I had mentioned earlier about, like, for example, between developers and SRE, that whole like firewall nature, there can be bad security policies which actually actively hinder automation. So if you find yourself in the fact that, oh, we're not able to move fast and do certain things because of XYZ security policy, I would say that that's a bad security policy. Yeah, I know I'm kind of rambling here because I'm just like kind of throwing out my thoughts, but yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Feel free to leave a comment. And to how to land our first cybersecurity, I think that how to land our first cybersecurity job, that goes back to Chris talking about internships. And it's similar. Internships are a great way of getting introduced to like different companies, and I would absolutely leverage those to find an in to different companies. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through and reading the comments. Alex, I don't know if you wanted to highlight any specific questions, given we have 7 minutes left. I just saw this hilarious comment. Have you tried reminding criminals that unauthorized use is illegal? Yeah, anyone remember those videos of don't steal the VHS tapes?
You wouldn't
download a car.
Yes, exactly.
Nowadays you would, because it's all software.
Definitely.
Carvana, right?
Yeah.
How to not get overwhelmed while learning cybersecurity? Find a community. Join if you're okay. I see that you mentioned that you're self-taught, but there's a lot of online forums and communities out there. I think just having that exchange and having like someone to like be able to bounce ideas off helps.
It's also, in my experience, a huge field, and there's 1,001 things that you can start with, and there's no wrong place to start. So cutting it down to something really small, really focused, like what we had mentioned earlier, trying to figure out like how to set up a WAF or a firewall on your local network. Start with small things and then move up to bigger stuff.
Okay. How do Chris or Josh, one of you want to take the home lab question? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of online resources out there.
I can give you a simple one. If you have a spare computer, look at how you can re-image it with code like Foreman or something. Lay down Linux. So those are two very distinct things. And after that, how to install the Kubernetes setup on it, the third part. Then after that, build from there.
Cool. Alex, if you're still around, are there any other questions? I don't know if I missed any.
No, I think we got through them all. We do have a few minutes left, so if anybody has any final questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now. But if not, we'll wrap up. I'll give you all 20, 30 seconds to get any last questions in there. All right, going final time here. Not seeing anything come in, so we will call it a day. Ellora, Josh, and Chris, thank you so much. This was an awesome session, as seen by how many questions we had in. So hope everybody enjoyed it. For those that want to, feel free to stick around, refresh your screen, and we'll have a Twilio workshop after this that you can tune into as well to kick off your Global Hack Week security. So hope to see you there. And if not, have a great day and happy hacking, everyone.
Sweet. Thank you so much for having us. This was really fun. Thank you for all the questions. And I am very excited to see people getting into SRE.
Thanks.
Bye, folks.
See you all.
Bye, everyone.